You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Folks, in New Mexico, there's an interesting scenario beginning to unravel, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. You see, there's a courtroom in the state of New Mexico where the United Nations flag shares space with the New Mexico and United States flags in Judge Benjamin Eastburn's courtroom. You see, the judge knows what I know, and he says he ain't taking it out. How about that? What have you got to say about it? In Aztec, New Mexico, about a dozen people carrying United States and New Mexico flags and picket signs marched in front of the county's judicial complex Friday afternoon, protesting a United Nations flag hanging in District Judge Benjamin Eastburn's court. The group marched peacefully outside the complex for about 30 minutes. Harley Sills of Aztec said the protesters were not from any formal organization, just a group of concerned citizens opposed to what the United Nations flag represents. We don't approve of the UN flag or what it stands for. One world order, Sills said. The flag was a sign of the encroachment of world order ideas in the United States and of the erosion of individual rights in this country, he said. Eventually, they'll take the whole world over. They're chipping away at our rights, and we want to protect what's left, Sills said. The court complex was paid for with taxpayers' money, and as such belongs to the taxpayers, he added. We don't like the United Nations flag flying over our complex. Old Glory is good enough for us. The protesters carried signs that called for Eastburn to remove the United Nations flag and included a number of epithets regarding the judge himself. Among the slogans were, Eastburn, take your un-American flag home, and no communism, no socialism, no one world order. Others said Eastburn was showing his true colors and called the United Nations flag a symbol of slavery. Eastburn did not comment on the representations made by the protesters, but did say the flag would not be removed. You figure. If you've been listening, well, I'm sitting here drinking a glass of ice orange juice, or orange juice and ice, or some orange juice that turned to ice or something, and it's got my tongue all messed up, folks. If you've been listening for the last several nights, you know a few things by now. You know, number one, according to treaty, the United Nations is the law of the land. Not the Constitution as you've always thought, but the United Nations. And I cited the law to you. You also heard that your rights are not protected as you thought they were. There is no protection at all, in fact, for individual rights in the United Nations Charter or the resolutions that they've passed. Also, the part in the UN Charter and in the UN resolutions calling for equality of race, religion, and creed and all of that kind of stuff, guaranteeing you that you will not be discriminated against, was not automatically empowered and therefore does not apply. I read you that. I also read you where the courts are now interpreting the second article in amendment to mean you have the right to keep and bear arms only if you are in a militia, and many, many, many others. I explained to you that the Department of the Treasury is not an agency of the United States government, but is in fact an international organization under the United Nations. The Secretary of the Treasury is paid by the International Monetary Fund and the BATF, or Bureau of Alcohol, Tobaccos, and Firearms, and the Secret Service and customs agents, which, by the way, Lars Hansen was a customs agent. Could never figure out where he was coming from until we discovered that little fact. Also, he was a member of the Stell Group, along with Tom Valentine, where they came to know each other. And many, many other magnificent little tidbits of information have been put out to you, folks. What you have discovered is that these international police forces, because that's what they are immune from all the laws of the United States. Yes, that includes the BATF, the Secret Service, customs agents, and many, many more. I also advised you that there is a multi-jurisdictional task force, if you will, called MFO in international jargon, which is made up of law enforcement and military forces of several different nations, which can go anywhere it pleases and do whatever it pleases, and is exempt from the laws of the United States of America. How about that? I've outlined to you the entire program of disarmament of the world, including the United States and its people, in the law. And I've cited the law to you so that there is no misunderstanding, and not one single one of you can claim that I made it up. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we've been a part of world government for a long time now. You just didn't know it. The American people had to be brought into this slowly through a program of indoctrination, propaganda, lies, deceit, and manipulation. You are being taught that because there are holes in the ozone layer, there must be an international body to guard the atmosphere against the assault of humanity. And you are told that because we use CFCs in our air conditioners and our refrigerators, these holes are getting bigger, and the sun, the ultraviolet light, is streaming down through these holes and is roasting you where you stand, causing a great increase in the amount of skin cancer. And it's a lie. It's just one of the many manipulations, ladies and gentlemen. The reason it's a lie, as any high school physics or chemistry book will tell you, is that ozone does not protect you from ultraviolet light. And a lack of ozone does not allow huge amounts of ultraviolet light to come down that normally is not here and fry you inside your skin and give you cancer. No. Because as these very elemental textbooks will tell you, ozone is created by ultraviolet light. You see, as ultraviolet light comes through the Earth's atmosphere from the sun, it encounters molecules of oxygen. The ultraviolet light is decreased in its energy and in its concentration as it causes this molecule to split into two individual atoms called ions of oxygen. These seek something to attach themselves to because they're what's called radicals. Ions are radical. As soon as they find another molecule of O2 or oxygen, they attach themselves, and that molecule then becomes ozone, or O3. Haven't you ever wondered why every photograph of an ozone hole is over one or the other of the poles, the Earth's poles? Always, when that particular pole is experiencing its winter months. It's very simple, folks. You see, these are not ozone holes. These are not places where the ozone has been destroyed and thus has caused a hole in the atmosphere where ultraviolet light is streaming through and frying humans. No, not at all. Due to the tilt of the Earth on its axis, these are areas in the Earth's atmosphere that while that particular pole is experiencing its winter months, that portion of the atmosphere is away from the sun. No ultraviolet light hits that portion of the atmosphere, and thus this reaction simply does not take place. There is no ozone created. How about that? Another scam courtesy of the socialist New World Order. A blatant lie. Mankind in its entire history has never created enough CFCs, ladies and gentlemen, to cause any damage to any portion of any of the ozone in the atmosphere, simply because the molecule of CFCs is too heavy to get up there. It is really the chlorine that causes ozone to deplete. But since ozone is constantly being manufactured as sunlight streams into the atmosphere, and since ozone ions, or ozone molecules, have a radical ion attached to them, ozone doesn't last very long anyway. It's constantly being destroyed and created and destroyed and created all the time. How about that? Isn't that amazing? I wonder how many of you fell for that scam and were saying, oh, we've got to do something about the ozone layer. Oh, we need an international organization to make sure that people in these other countries don't use CFCs and pollute the atmosphere and destroy the ozone because we're all going to fry where we stand. Huh? Not you? Baloney. The Council on Foreign Relations is not involved in this, huh? According to Rush Limbaugh, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission are not involved in any attempt to destroy the sovereignty of the United States of America and bring about one world government. A blatant lie. Blatant. You see? Because if you will get the publication, which is the periodical of the Council on Foreign Relations, the name of it is Foreign Relations. For April 1974, the publication called Foreign Relations, April 1974, the lead article is called Hard Road to World Order. Hard Road to World Order. And in that article, ladies and gentlemen, they outline the blueprint on how they intend to destroy the sovereignty of the United States of America and make world government possible. You can discover the same thing in the periodicals and the publications of the Trilateral Commission, and if you write to either one of these organizations, they will send you a list of their members, and you can see exactly who they are. a list of their publications. You can subscribe to Foreign Relations, which I have been doing for years, and we have Foreign Relations on the shelves in our library back here, and I have a whole bunch of them at home, because you see, I learned a long time ago, you must understand the enemy if you're going to fight him. I meet many of you every day who say, oh, I can't read that stuff. It's from Satan. Well, I guarantee it was a man that wrote it, not Satan. And what's happening on this earth is being brought about by men who have a racial agenda and a religious agenda and a social agenda, all of which is the antithesis to the principles and ideals upon which this country was based. In an address in New York City before the United Nations on October 24, 1950, Harry S. Truman said this: 5 years ago today, the Charter of the United Nations came into force. By virtue of that event, October 24, 1945 became a great day in the history of the world, a great day in the history of the world. Long before that day, the idea of an association of nations to keep the peace had lived as a dream in the hearts and minds of men. Woodrow Wilson was the author of that idea in our time. The organization that was brought into being on October the 24th, 1945, represents our greatest advance toward making that dream a reality. The United Nations represents the idea of a universal morality, superior to the interests of individual nations. Its foundation does not rest upon power or privilege. It rests upon faith. They rest upon the faith of men in human values, upon the belief that men in every land hold the same high ideals and strive toward the same goals for peace and justice. That's really strange, folks. You see, I've been all over the world. I've been in many foreign nations, and that just isn't true. Not only is it not true, it's not even close to being true. In fact, it's so far from the truth that it's pathetic, and it's beyond my understanding how a president of the United States could have ever made such a statement. He goes on, that's just the beginning. Many of you who fought in the Korean War will love this statement made by Harry S. Truman, the great traitor who signed the United Nations Treaty, pushed through the UN Participation Act, and made us a vassal state of the United Nations, and then lied to the American people. But he did not lie to the United Nations. Listen to this. In past broadcasts of the Hour of the Time, I have told you that the Korean War was not about saving the Korean people or saving democracy in South Korea. It was about building democracy for the world, and remember, democracy is a code word for socialism. It was about empowering the United Nations. Listen to this statement by Harry S. Truman, made in 1950. He confirms exactly what I've been telling you. In fact, this is going to make some of you angry. Quote, "The men who laid down their lives for the United Nations in Korea will have a place in our memory and in the memory of the world forever. They died in order that the United Nations might live." End quote. Now, that ought to fill some bar stools down at the local VFW hall tonight, don't you think? And he further says, to do so, the United Nations must be prepared to use force. The United Nations did use force to curb aggression in Korea, and by so doing has greatly strengthened the cause of peace. I am glad that additional steps are being taken at this session to prepare for quick and effective actions in the future case of aggression. He says, if real disarmament were achieved, the nations of the world acting through the United Nations can join in a greatly enlarged program of mutual aid to support the United Nations. In this way, our armaments would be transformed into foods, medicines, tools for use in underdeveloped areas and into other aids for human advancement. the latest discoveries of science could be made available to men all over the globe. Thus we could give real meaning to the old promise that swords shall be beaten into plowshares and that nations shall not learn war anymore. The President spoke at 11:30 a.m. in New York City. In his opening words, he referred to Nasrullah Intizam, President of the General Assembly, and Trigavli, Secretary General of the United Nations, and the address was carried on a nationwide radio broadcast, which probably no one remembers. In the yearbook of the United Nations for 1980, Volume 34, Department of Public Information, United Nations, New York, on page 102, Annex, Declaration of the 1980s as the second disarmament decade. You guys didn't even know what was going on, did you? You've been scammed so long, folks. I'm telling you, you've been living in Disneyland. You have no conception of the real world. You keep talking as if this country still has sovereignty and exists on its own. You still keep talking about the Constitution. You see, folks, I got faxes and letters and all kinds of stuff saying that what I told you last night was erroneous, that treaties do not supersede the Constitution, that the second article and amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms for all Americans, regardless of whether they're in the militia or not. You people are not playing with a full deck of cards, unfortunately. I wish you were right. Of course, you're right in the intent of the law and in the intent of our founding fathers, and you're right in the early court rulings on these issues. But, folks, we have to deal with reality, and what I'm telling you is reality. What I read you last night were actual court rulings. You see, they flopped everything 180 degrees. And it doesn't matter what you think, and it doesn't matter when you're in that courtroom if you stand before the judge and rail against him about how they can't do it. You're full of crap. They've already done it. It's a done deal. You can yell and scream all you want. You can tell the judge that he can't tell you that you can't have a rifle or a pistol because the second article and amendment guarantees you that right, and it's meant for all the people, whether they're in the militia or not. You're going to make the judge angry, and you're going to go to jail because the judge don't care. You see, they've taken over this country. They've flopped everything 180 degrees. They've made right wrong and wrong right. And while I agree with you on the principles, you are wrong in the reality of the situation. And you cannot afford to be wrong today. We must restore the Constitution because it is not in effect, and you better get that through your thick heads. We are under United Nations international law right this moment and have been since 1945. For many years, nobody saw any results of this because they had to promote a huge brainwashing and propaganda campaign against the American people to get them to accept it. Part of that is what's known as the New Age movement. Part of that is the ozone holes. Part of it is global warming. Part of it is pollution, environmental destruction, done on purpose to create this cry for international control. Read the report from Iron Mountain. The report from Iron Mountain. The possibility and probability of permanent peace. All of these things were outlined in that book as contingency plans to bring about world government and do away with wars forever. Do you really think that the United States government built a Holocaust museum in this nation because a minority of the population wanted it? They built it to make war look so horrible, to make anti-Semitism a political tool. Doesn't matter whether you're Jew, Gentile, black, white, green, purple, Oriental, Christian, Jew, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu. These are all tools to bring about world government. And folks, the average Jewish person has no more knowledge about any of this than you did before I told you. They are tools, pawns in the game, if you will, puppets on the end of strings, just like you are. So get off their back. At the highest levels, the people involved in this are from all the different spectrums, races, and religions. Most of them belong to the secret societies that are known collectively as the Illuminati. And yes, there is a racial agenda, and all of them have bought into it in one form or another. Even the blacks. And that's pathetic. There are four forces at work in the world to bring about world government. One is international Zionism. One is French Freemasonry, by whatever name it goes by. You see, the lodge does not have to be a Freemasonic lodge to be a part of this. One is British Freemasonry, also known as British Israelism. Are you with me? And the other one, folks, is the Vatican. Now, two of these elements always take sides with one or the other. The Vatican, for some reason, always sides with communism. And international Zionism, for some reason, always sides with British Israelism. Communism is the result of French Freemasonry, and British Israelism is the result of British Freemasonry. These two elements are at war constantly, trying to gain power and wealth and seat their Messiah upon the throne of the world. Now that sounds pretty far-fetched until you get into the depths of study to which I have participated. And you will find that the occult controls both sides of this, that they're moving all of the religions of the world into one world humanist religion, wherein man becomes God. And you can watch your favorite preachers on Sunday morning on television, or at any time during the day or night if you have a satellite dish and can tune into these Christian channels. Listen to them. Pat Robertson. What's that guy, Paul? Robert Schuller, Jerry Falwell, Zionist through and through. And folks, Zionism has absolutely nothing to do at the globalist level with the state of Israel in any other manner than using it as a tool to bring about world government. And you'd better understand that right now. Political and security questions in the 1980 United Nations Yearbook. Goals and principles. The goals of the second disarmament decade should be conceived in the context of the ultimate objective of the efforts of states in the disarmament process, which is general and complete disarmament under effective international control as elaborated in the final document. Everybody in Washington, D.C. knows what I've been telling you for the last few nights, and you've learned more in the last few nights than you will learn in your entire lifetime listening to anybody else. They all know it. Yep, even old Newt. Even old Bob Dole. That's why they lied to you. Get you feeling secure. Oh, Gat's not going to pass. Dole's against it. The Republicans won't let it pass. But it passed, didn't it? It passed because it had to pass, because it takes us further into world government, because that's where we're going. You didn't even know it, but GATT's been around since the late 40s. That's right, folks. It wasn't new. Not at all. And there are so many thousands of pages, it establishes, in effect, a superior power to the United States which can dictate to us. And just as the United States federal government took the sovereignty away from the states and the individuals through its power granted by the Constitution over interstate commerce, so will this world government take the sovereignty from the nations and the individual citizens of the nations through international commerce under NAFTA and GATT.
Those of you who may have missed it last night, I'm going to read this again. This article was originally published in the New Age, the official publication of International Freemasonry, in September of 1950. It was authored by Masonic scholar C. William Smith. And it's the truth as close as you're ever going to hear it from their lips, and they very seldom make these kinds of slips, although every time they have throughout their history, I have been able to locate it and document it and deliver their own words from their own mouth over these airways. You'll notice since I began this week's programming, revealing to you for the first time the truth, documented in such magnitude that no one can challenge it ever, that we've been jammed every night. You must start calling your congressmen and senators, the FCC and WWCR, and force them to stop the jamming. But here's the article. God's plan is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. This plan, dedicated to the new order of things, is to make all things new. A new nation, a new race, a new civilization, and a new religion. A non-sectarian religion that has already been recognized and called the religion of the Great Light. Now that's the first paragraph. They told some truth in that paragraph, and they told some lies, as you will hear if you are listening carefully to the rest of this article. You see, it sounds good when they say God's plan is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. First place, they don't tell you which God. And in the second place, it's a lie. Listen to this. Looking back into history, we can easily see that the guiding hand of Providence has chosen the Nordic people to bring in and unfold the new order of the world. Sounds racist to me. How about you? Been telling you all along this has a racial agenda. He goes on, records clearly show that 95% of the colonists were Nordics, Anglo-Saxons. So what? This is 1995. And he goes on, providence has chosen the Nordics because the Nordics have prepared themselves and have chosen God. More bullshit, folks. They want you to think it's the same God that you worship in the Bible. Their God is Lucifer, and they believe in the Luciferian philosophy, that Adam and Eve were held prisoners in the Garden of Eden. They were set free from the chains of ignorance by the gift of intellect from Satan, Lucifer. And through the use of this gift of intellect, man himself will become God. They may have fooled themselves, but they sure haven't fooled me. They go on to say the Nordics are God's chosen people, always looking for more light on the mission of life. Just as providence has chosen the Jewish race, the children of Israel, to bring into the world righteousness by carrying the 10 Commandments, which emphasize, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, so also providence has chosen the Nordic race to unfold the new age of the world, a novus ordo seclorum. Now notice here they've given themselves away. See, on the one hand, they claim to be the true Israelites, yet they specifically state here that the 10 Commandments were given to the Jewish race, which is not the Nordic. They always slip like this because they're so arrogant that they think the rest of us are too stupid to figure it out. Novus ordo seclorum means a secular world order without religion. Understand that? Without God. Secular is worldly, of the material world. If you have relatives in any of these secret societies, by whatever name, you had better get them out of it. Because someday soon, patriots are going to simply kick their butts for what they've done to destroy this nation. With their lies and their deceit. He goes on to say, one of the first of the Nordics to reach the New World was the Viking, Leif Erikson. He sailed from Norway to bring his people in Ireland a new message, the message of the Christian God. But providence moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform, and so Leif the Lucky was sent by providence to the New World. From the abundance of grapes found there, Leif Erikson called the place Vinland. It is easy to sense that Leif Erikson was sent by the guiding hand of providence to bring the Norse spirit of the All-Father to the shores of the New World. The Norse All-Father, ladies and gentlemen, is not the God of the Bible. And where Leif Erikson may have been trying to take the message of the Christian God to Ireland, I sincerely doubt it, because Christianity was in Ireland long before it was in Norway. Long before it ever reached Norway. He goes on to say the Nordics are the highest branch, and listen to this, are the highest branch of the 5th Aryan civilization, right out of the New Age textbooks. They say the Latins are of the 4th Aryan civilization, and the American race will be the 6th Aryan civilization. Boy, Blavatsky would be proud. She would be so proud to learn that her Aryan scam actually took root in the minds of these kindergarten humans. He goes on to say this new and great civilization is like an American beauty rosebud ready to open and send its wonderful fragrance to all the world. I've already told you that the symbol, one red rose, is the symbol of international socialism, ladies and gentlemen. Communism, if you will. Also, we've learned through the first-hand testimony of several officers who have been Delta Force officers, that it is an absolute requirement that you must be a 32nd degree Freemason or higher to be an officer in Delta Force since its inception. And when they were assigned their first headquarters a rose garden was planted in honor of Colonel Beckwith's special love for the red rose. Lieutenant Colonel James Bobo Gritz was a member of Delta Force, in fact, a commander of Delta Force. In Freedom Call 90 in Las Vegas, I sat in the audience when he gave his talk, and he said, and I quote verbatim from his lips, "I am a 32nd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite," end quote. William Smith continues in this article, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Paine, and many others of the founders of the new nation in the New World were Nordics. Thomas Paine, the spark plug of the American Revolution, loved God but hated sectarianism. "In these are the times," he wrote, "we have it in our power to begin the world all over again. A situation similar to the present hath not happened since the days of Noah till now. The birthday of a new world is at hand." Now, they're going to try to tell you, folks, that the Nordics are the English peoples, the Anglo-Aryan peoples. The Nordics, if you study your history, were the northern Europeans that came from the frozen lands in the winter, the Vikings who raided the shores of England and the other, I guess in that day you would have called them civilized nations, even though compared to our day they were very, very little civilized. He goes on to say, as stated before, God's plan in America is a non-sectarian plan. Well, it depends upon who you are and what you believe, doesn't it? If you're a Christian, and if God sent Jesus Christ to establish a church in this world, then God's plan was not sectarian. If you belong to the religion of Muhammad, if you are a Muslim or any one of the different races or nationalities that belong or follow the Prophet Muhammad, you certainly don't believe that, because your religion is one of the most sectarian in the world. So whose God are they talking about here? Not most people's God. They're talking about their God. And Albert Pike made it very clear. Christopher Albert Pike, in his book called Morals and Dogma, stated clearly that their God is Lucifer. In one prominent church in the United States, it is said that Jesus and Lucifer were brothers. Jesus had his chance. Now it's Lucifer's turn. Of course, they don't say that publicly. You have to get in their secret rites in the temple and in their writings to discover that. They also believe that when you die, you're given your own planet. And you and your wife, if you were good members of your church, you become gods and populate your planet with souls through eternal celestial intercourse. I swear, folks, I do not know where you get your brains, because most Woolworths went out of business a long time ago. Sears closed all their rural facilities, so there must be some traveling brain salesman running around selling you your stupidity. If you see the guy, tell him to stay away from St. John's, Arizona. Please. He goes on to say, our great American public schools have never taken away from any child the freedom of will, freedom of spirit, or freedom of mind. That is the divine reason that great God, our King, has chosen the great American public schools to pave the way for the new race, the new religion, and the new civilization that is taking place in America Hallelujah. I can't believe they're taking credit for the disaster that is our public school system that's turning out idiots who can't spell their name. But maybe that's God's great plan for America. You see, folks, the whole idea for public schools run by the government came out of the lodges of Freemasonry, and they have publicly taken credit for that. And the purpose of it was to dumb down the children of America so they would not know what was happening to them. So they would not challenge the new sectarian order, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. And he continues, any mother, father, or guardian who is responsible for the taking away of freedom of mind, freedom of will, or freedom of spirit is the lowest criminal on this earth. Because they take away from that child the God-given right to become a part of God's great plan in America for the dawn of the new age of the world. End quote. In other words, don't teach your children anything. Don't teach them morals. Don't teach them right from wrong. And for God's sake, don't discipline them. And that's where all of this stuff comes from. Right out of the lodges of the ancient order of the Rose and Cross, Freemasonry in all its various forms, the Ordo Templi Orientalis, the Golden Dawn. I could go on and on and on and on. Rosicrucianism. The Knights of Pythias, the ancient and military order of the Knights of Malta, the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem. You've been looking around for an enemy, ladies and gentlemen, and they've been in your house, sitting at your own table all this time. The Illuminati have been in control of these so-called fraternal brotherhoods since their inception. Their goal has always been the same, to destroy all existing nation-states, all existing religions, and to chain the mob, and that is you. They have all this flowering speech that's supposed to lull you into accepting it, and most of you do, without question, because you're stupid. Executive Order number 12425 of June 16th, 1983, signed by your hero, Ronald Reagan, the man who spent more money in 8 years than the entire United States government ever spent collectively in its entire history. It's entitled International Criminal Police Organizations. By virtue of the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and statutes of the United States, including Section 1 of the International Organizations Immunities Act, 59 Statute 669-22, United States Code 288, it is hereby ordered that the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol, in which the United States participates pursuant to 22 United States Code 263A, is hereby designated as a public international organization entitled to enjoy the privileges, exemptions, and immunities conferred by the International Organizations Immunities Act. Signed, Ronald Reagan, the White House, June 16, 1983. Executive Order 12359 of April 22nd, 1982. Public international organizations entitled to enjoy privileges, exemptions, and immunities. By the authority vested in me as President of the United States of America by Section 1 of the International Organizations Immunities Act, and having found that the United States participates in the following organizations, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. the multinational force and observers in which the United States participates pursuant to Section 138 of Public Law 97-51 and Public Law 97-132 is hereby designated as a public international organization entitled to enjoy the privileges, exemptions, and immunities. There's much, much more. Much more. Public Law 97-132 says in one paragraph, two paragraphs, premises of the MFO. Without prejudice to the fact that all the premises of the MFO remain the territory of the receiving state, they shall be inviolable and subject to the exclusive control and authority of the Director General, who alone may consent to the entry of officials to perform duty on such premises. You wonder where these multi-jurisdictional task forces come from? How all of a sudden is jurisdiction where the Constitution forbids it? They are international forces. The insurrection is over. You may be prisoners of war tomorrow. MFO flag. The receiving states permit the MFO to display a special flag or insignia of a design agreed upon by them on its headquarters, camps, posts, or other premises, vehicles, boats, and otherwise, as decided by the Director General. Director General? Who's that? United Nations. Public Law 97-132, privileges and immunities of the MFO. The MFO shall enjoy the status, privileges, and immunities accorded in Article 2 of the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations hereinafter the Convention. The provisions of Article 2 of the Convention shall also apply to the property, funds, and assets of participating states used in the receiving state in connection with the activities of the MFO. During the fire in Waco, when the children and the women and the men and boys of the Branch Davidians were burning to death, the people who you thought were United States agents of the federal government were seen with their hands in the air bowing to the flames. For in the secret societies they are known as the philosophers of fire, and they always burn their enemies, or they bleed them in an act of blood atonement. It says in paragraph 30 on page 17, the MFO shall also enjoy within the areas where it is functioning the right of unrestricted communication by radio, telephone, telegraph, or any other means, and of establishing the necessary facilities for maintaining such communications within or between the premises of the MFO. It says the government of the receiving states recognize the right of the MFO to make arrangements through its own facilities for the processing and transport of private mail addressed to or emanating from members of the MFO. Such mail is inviolable. When the MFO uses roads, bridges, port facilities, and airfields, it shall not be subject to payment of dues, tolls, or charges, either by way of registration or otherwise. The MFO shall have the right to the use of water, electricity, and other public utilities at rates not less favorable to the MFO than those of comparable consumers. The MFO may recruit locally such personnel as required. The authorities of the receiving state will, upon the request of the Director General, assist the MFO in the recruitment of such personnel. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? I wonder how many of you really do. You keep talking as if something's going to happen in the future. It's been happening for years, for God's sake. It's over. Title 22, Foreign Relations and Intercourse. Subchapter 18, Privileges and Immunities of International Organizations. Folks, this lists international organizations that are immune from the laws of the United States of America. can do anything, commit murder, like they did at Waco, and walk away scot-free. You keep screaming for an investigation. Congress cannot investigate. It is the law. They are immune. Immune. They can come in your house, chop your heads off tomorrow. They are immune. Under this law, it specifically states multinational force and observers. Executive Order number 12359, April 22nd, 1982, 47 FR 17791. And many, many more. Many more. The United Nations. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Universal Postal Union. World Health Organization. World Intellectual Property Organization. World Meteorological Organization. International Monetary Fund is immune. International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol, is immune. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development is immune. International Atomic Energy is immune. I can go on and on and on and on and on. For there are many, many, many listed here. International Maritime Satellite Organization is immune. International organizations, their property and their assets, wherever located and by whomsoever held, shall enjoy the same immunity from suit and every form of judicial process as is enjoyed by foreign governments, except to the extent that such organizations may expressly waive their immunity for the purpose of any proceedings or by the terms of any contract. And what do you think the chances of that happening are? Good night. Wake up. God bless you all, and God save the Republic. And if I'm still alive, we'll continue this tomorrow night.